What if I told you that the 1970s was not just about disco, bell-bottoms, and hippie culture, but a decade that changed rock music forever? As the 60s pop and psychedelic rock started to fade, a new era began to dawn. The 1970s brought a seismic shift in the music scene. Rock music started to evolve, becoming more aggressive, more raw, and ultimately more real. This was the dawn of a musical revolution. Indeed, the 1970s was a decade where rock music was redefined and gave birth to numerous subgenres we love today. The early 70s witnessed the birth of two major subgenres, hard rock and heavy metal. This era was marked by the emergence of bands that would forever change the landscape of rock music and leave an indelible mark on the world of music. Among these pioneers were the likes of Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, and Deep Purple. Led Zeppelin, with their powerful and explosive sound, broke through the barriers of traditional rock. Their music was a fusion of blues, folk, and rock, creating a unique sound that was both raw and electrifying. Their songs like Stairway to Heaven and Whole Lotta Love embodied the essence of hard rock, and their impact is still felt today. Black Sabbath, on the other hand, ventured into the darker realms of music, birthing the genre we now know as heavy metal. Their music was heavy, their lyrics were dark, and their sound was unlike anything the world had heard before. Songs like Iron Man and Paranoid are still considered cornerstones of the heavy metal genre. And then there was Deep Purple, a band that beautifully bridged the gap between hard rock and heavy metal. Their music was a perfect blend of the heavy riffs and dark lyrics of metal and the raw energy of hard rock. These bands not only redefined rock music, but also paved the way for future artists to experiment and expand the genre. Midway through the decade, a new wave of rock music emerged, known as punk rock. A genre steeped in controversy and counterculture, punk rock was the voice of rebellion, a siren call to the disaffected youth of the 70s. Among the pioneers of this raw, unfiltered sound were bands like the Ramones and the Sex Pistols. The Ramones, hailing from New York City, stripped rock and roll down to its bare bones, delivering rapid-fire tunes with a DIY ethos. Across the pond, the Sex Pistols were stirring up a storm in the UK, their anarchic lyrics and provocative behavior becoming a magnet for controversy. Punk rock was more than just a genre. It was a reaction, a revolt against the commercialization of rock music. It rejected the polished, overproduced sounds that had come to dominate the airwaves, opting instead for a grittier, more authentic expression. This was music that was raw, loud, and unapologetically rebellious. It wasn't about technical prowess or record sales. It was about attitude, about saying something real, and about challenging the status quo. In a time of social and political upheaval, punk rock gave a voice to disillusioned youth, providing a platform for them to vent their frustrations and challenge societal norms. Punk rock shook the foundations of the music industry and reminded everyone that rock music was meant to be raw, loud, and rebellious. As we journeyed through the 1970s, we witnessed the birth of hard rock, heavy metal, and punk rock. This decade was a time of great musical exploration. Artists pushed boundaries, experimenting with new sounds and styles, and in doing so, they gave birth to a new era of rock music. This era was marked by the rise of hard rock and heavy metal. Bands like Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, and Deep Purple took the world by storm with their heavy riffs and powerful vocals. They created a sound that was raw, loud, and unapologetically rebellious. Their music became the soundtrack of a generation, reflecting the social and political unrest of the time. Then came punk rock, a genre that was all about rebellion and expressing discontent with the status quo. It was the voice of the people, speaking out against societal norms and challenging authority. Bands like the Ramones, the Sex Pistols, and the Clash, with their fast-paced, aggressive music, became the poster children of this movement. In summary, the 1970s was a decade of revolution in rock music. It was a time when artists were not afraid to push boundaries and challenge conventions. They created music that was raw, rebellious, and resonated with people on a deep level. Their legacy continues to influence rock music to this day. So the next time you turn up the volume on a rock track, remember the 1970s, the decade that revolutionized rock music forever.